Greetings, peoples of the interwebs. Jake here, and I just got done seeing the Guy Ritchie King Arthur movie, Legend of the Sword. So, a little bit of background information. Guy Ritchie's been trying to get this movie made for a few years now. I don't know how long exactly, but I know he's been. It's kind of been a passion project of his to do a King Arthur movie, and for whatever reason, it's kind of been either in like development hell for a while, or just trouble. I don't know. I guess getting like cast or finances. I'm not 100% sure on the details, but basically, and also the film's been delayed a couple times. I think it was actually supposed to come out last year, but then for whatever reason it got delayed, and so it's out now. And I gotta be honest, I was not expecting a whole lot. The trailers didn't really blow me away, and even though I like Guy Ritchie, his style in some of his films, I wasn't entirely sure what like a fantasy, because this King Arthur movie is very much fantasy, like pretty much from the get go, magic and you know giant elephants and other weird creatures and stuff like that throughout the movie. So he doesn't hold back. It is very much over the top. But so I wasn't really sure how a Guy Ritchie King Arthur kind of fantasy sword and sandal type movie would be. And also, again, the fact that this movie's had a lot of troubles with, again, getting delayed or just getting made and all that stuff. That's usually, a lot of times with movies, that's not a good indication that the studio has a whole lot of faith in it. And again, that doesn't always mean the quality of the film is bad. It's just for whatever reason, the studio may just not be particularly feeling that movie or that genre. But, and again, like I was saying, the trailers didn't really blow me away. I felt like this movie could kind of go either way, but I was leaning a little bit more towards this movie may not be that great. But I walked out of the theater. I was pleasantly surprised. It's not great. Like it's not Guy Ritchie's best movie by any means, but I will say it is actually a fairly enjoyable movie. And actually, I almost wish this movie was a little bit longer, and because I feel like there are just some things that there's just a little bit more to it, that maybe like had to get cut just to make the movie a little bit shorter. So I'm curious to see if like this movie, when it comes out in Blu-ray, gets like an extended cut, because I do think that like maybe an additional 15 to like 30 minutes could actually be beneficial to kind of just flesh some of the story out, some of the characters a little bit, and just overall the world, because it's obviously a very fictitious, fantastical version of the real world. Camelot, as in Arthurian legend, typically takes place in England. And so it's kind of like a back and forth between going from Londinium, which is the Latin word for London, going back and forth between Londinium and Camelot and a few other locations throughout England. But for the most part, I think this was kind of a cool reimagining, if you will, of Arthurian legend, because as the typical fashion, it does have a lot of magic and stuff like strange creatures, if not. I don't know, just pretty much anything kind of fantasy related. Whether there's like dragons involved, or whatever, there's usually some elements of magic and kind of fantasy. Aside from I think it was like 2004 Clive Owen movie, which was a kind of more realistic, like if Arthur did exist, this is more than likely what it would have been like, which I actually like that movie for what it is and kind of appreciate it because I'm a big history person. But anyways, so I think this movie is more in line with the Excalibur movie. I think that came out in 1982. I could be wrong, but I'd say that's probably the most famous King Arthur movie, which I'd recommend. It's definitely worth a watch. It's got a great cast, especially of actors who are now super famous, like Liam Neeson, Patrick Stewart. This was back before they were name actors. And it's got like some other pretty well-known actors as well that are now household names, but this is more in line with that. It being more magic in nature. This one's definitely way more over the top with magic. Like Excalibur's maybe a little bit more subtle and slightly more grounded, whereas this is just kind of magic. Again, pretty much from the get-go, magic, which is totally fine. Like that's if you're going to remake or do a different version of kind of this classic story that's been retold over and over again in some form or fashion, whether it be movies, TV shows, books, comics, any kind of media, you have to kind of add your own spin to it. And I think Guy Ritchie did a really good job of just pulling off kind of an epic scale fantasy movie, but he still managed to have his Guy Ritchie-isms that makes all of his movies so just Guy Ritchie, because he has that very unique style. And that was another thing that I was a little concerned with going into the movie is how is his just very unique style going to fit in with something like King Arthur? Because it actually did fit pretty well with his Sherlock Holmes films, where it's just that kind of like really quick, witty, quippy banter back and forth between characters and all that stuff. And there is some of this in King Arthur, but it's done really well. Like, I was kind of afraid that would kind of take you out of the movie. And maybe it did for some, but for me, I thought it was really enjoyable. And again, it's a Guy Ritchie movie, so that's kind of what you expect. So as a whole, this movie, again, it's not great, but I do think it's actually worth checking out in the theaters. You know, if you've got like a day where you're off, whether it be a weekend or, you know, you got a free afternoon, don't really have anything else going on, I think it's definitely worth checking out. Because again, it's a really enjoyable movie. I still don't think the movie's going to do that well financially, though. I don't know what it did over the weekend, because Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is still going on its second weekend pretty strong. And Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is just a fantastic film. And then opening this Friday is Alien Covenant. So it's basically wedged in between two really popular franchises. I mean, I think it'll do well enough, hopefully internationally, because that's where a lot of these blockbuster movies make most of their money. So hopefully if it didn't do all that great domestically, it'll make its money back, you know, in the European markets, the Asian markets, and all that stuff. Because I do think that I would actually want to see more of this. I would like to see this become a franchise. You know, maybe do like another movie or two to just, I don't know, because I think there's just a lot you can do with the King Arthur lore. And even though this movie doesn't necessarily, set up for a sequel or a continuation or anything like that, I think it's still good enough and enjoyable enough to where, you know, with the characters and the lore that they built with it, to where if they do, again, if this movie does well enough to get a sequel, I'm up for it. Because it's a very enjoyable movie. Really well done. I don't know why it took so long for this movie to come out. Because I know there was a lot of extensive reshoots as well, but you know, maybe the reshoots were necessary because, I think overall it turned out well. I just kind of would have liked a little bit more. You know, again, an additional 15, 20, 30 minutes or just a little extra. Because one of the kind of pivotal scenes in the movie when King Arthur, played by Charlie Hunnam's, learning to wield Excalibur, they send him off to this kind of remote island, and they kind of just cover that in a montage where he's kind of off on the island. You see like kind of bits and pieces where he's struggling to fight off weird creatures and trying to, you know, wield the sword and all that. And it's very possible that was intentional, to just kind of be like, we don't really need to see like a whole 5 to 10 minute scene of just him wielding the sword when we can just kind of montage that and then focus on the main story at hand. So it's very possible that was intentional. But at the same time, I do think that's something they could have, Guy Ritchie could have done a little bit more of, is extend that a little bit more than just, a montage scene, basically, of him going across the island wielding the sword. So again, that's kind of an important part of this movie, because at the very beginning, when he first pulls the sword out, it's not this automatic, he's a sword expert and he knows how to wield the sword, because it's got this very almost intense magical property to it, to where, again, you can't just like pick it up and start swinging and hope for the best. It takes actually a lot of skill and focus to wield it. So that's, again, kind of one reason why I thought it was just, again, they could have extended the whole montage scene a little bit more, or again, just made it on a montage and just flush that a little bit more. But overall, I don't really have like a whole lot of, like really negative criticisms. They're kind of just like, again, nitpicks. But yeah, I thought it was a really fun, enjoyable movie. I do think it would have been better if it had come out in like maybe February, where there was a little less competition, or maybe like late summer, like in August or September. Because again, this month and really the next, through July, it's stacked with these massive tentpole films. And again, even though this is a pretty good movie overall, definitely fun and enjoyable. Again, it's wedged in between two powerhouses in franchise, because Alien is a beloved sci-fi horror franchise. Guardians is a more recent beloved franchise that is just it's great. So I think if this movie had come out either earlier in the year or maybe a little bit later, it'd probably do a little bit better. But again, for all I know, this could make a crap ton of money. It could be one of those movies that just has legs and keeps hanging in there. Sadly, I don't see that happening, though. But, again, hopefully with good word of mouth, because I know some critics have kind of been tearing it apart. But, yeah, there are things where you can kind of criticize it, but overall, I just take it for what it is. It's just a fun blockbuster with magic and, a really good cast fighting with swords and magic and stuff like that. So, I don't know. For me, it's one of those movies where don't take it too seriously, or judge it too harshly, because it's not one of those films that really requires it. Just kind of go into the theater, sit down, have a big bag or tub of popcorn, and just have fun. That's pretty what this movie is. So even though I could understand criticism for it, I don't think it's really necessary. Just have fun with the movie. That's what it is. But yeah, that pretty much wraps up this review. Hopefully you all have enjoyed. And if you've seen the movie, let me know what you all think. But before I start wrapping this up, time to start plugging away at the other things going on with Pacey Poe Productions and whatnot. So, as always, you can like us on Facebook at Pacey Poe Productions, or follow us on Twitter at Pacey Poe Pro to get news updates and all that stuff going on with the channel. And other projects we got going on. You can check out my anime podcast, Shogun's Gateway to Anime, on iTunes and Podbean. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's all about anime, where you discuss anime, review them, and just kind of gush about some of our favorite ones. And then Jordan actually started a new podcast with a good friend of ours in the channel, Phil, called Mild-Mannered Movie Men, which they have a Podbean account. I think they're going to start recording episodes soon, so it's going to be like a bi-weekly series. So I can leave a link in the description for that, where basically they're just going to talk all about movies. Maybe one week will be the big blockbusters, and then the next week will be kind of just movies I can recommend to each other, movies, past from, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or whatever that they just feel like talking about. So I'll leave links to all that stuff in the description below, to all the different podcasts and all that stuff. And we're almost at 200 subscribers. We're I think at like 186. So keep liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel, the videos, and all that stuff. Hopefully we can get to 200 by the end of the year, and if so, maybe we'll do like a live stream or something like that, and we'll just kind of hang out with you lovely people who have helped support the channel and the podcast and all that stuff. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at IrishmanJake. Feel free to submit ideas for podcast topics, or anime series to watch for the anime podcast and all that stuff. So thanks again, everybody, and until next time, cheers.